I wanted to take a brief moment with you today to share with you probably the second biggest question that we get from people during the week. And that question is, what do I need to do in order to buy or get approved to buy one of these homes? That's probably the second biggest question that we get each and every week. And I usually try to have a good conversation with whoever asks that particular question, because they're sincerely interested in wanting to make a purchase whenever they start getting serious about their discussions like that. But one of the first things I always tell them is that it's very important to know what your job history is, your credit history, what kind of monthly payment obligations you have, all of those kind of things, because that in large part is what determines what kind of a home loan you can be approved for. And once we know what kind of home loan you can be approved for, then we know what the different options are on the types of houses that you might be able to purchase. So anyway, one of the first things I do is get just a little bit of history from them. How long have they worked for the same employer, or at least in a similar line of work. It's good if they've been with the same employer 2 years, or at least, like I said, in the same line of work for 2 years. And then it's important to know how they're paid, because if they're paid by the piece or by the mile or by the load or something like that, then oftentimes that creates problems as far as deciding what kind of income they can use. But if they're hourly or salary or something like that, it's usually not a problem. If they've worked for 2 years or more for the same company, we can even count overtime. So all of those things are important to find out when we're first talking to somebody. So that's always information that I take good notes on, because I know that if we're trying to use basically their overtime, we need to know that, or bonuses for that matter. So anyway, that's one of the first things we do. And then we get their monthly payment obligations. And that includes things that generally appear on the credit report. That would include loans, student loans, car payments, credit card payments, about anything that's going to show up on the credit report. You don't count rent or utilities or things like that. So after we have that information, then we also need to know what their credit scores are. And sometimes people will have a pretty good idea what their credit scores are. Sometimes they think they know what their scores are, but they're not really sure about their true credit scores, because normally they know what Credit Karma shows or something like that. And Credit Karma is not a very good, reliable source of credit scores as far as the kind of scores that are used for home mortgages. It can be a source that's somewhat close, but it's usually not all that close. So anyway, after we kind of see where they're at, and I get a feel for whether I think that they'll be able to buy something sometime in the near future, I'll tell them that probably one of the things we really need to do is see what their true mortgage credit scores are. And if that's the case, we have to get their authorization to run the credit report. We always have to get that e-signed or signed in person. But in order to do that, we need their Social Security number, their home address, their employer, their monthly amount of rent that they're paying, all of that kind of information. And once we get their authorization, the lender runs their credit report to see what kind of scores they've got. And in addition to the credit scores, what's important to know is they got any problems that are identified on the report. And by problems, I mean things like bankruptcies that are on there, could be tax liens or other judgments against them. It's not just the credit scores that are important on a credit report. So anyway, that gives us the information that we need to kind of get a feel for what kind of application we're going to be able to help them with. But that's basically the information. Usually the same day I talk to them, I can kind of tell them, well, looks like about the kind of monthly payment you'd be approved for, depending on, of course, what your credit scores are. But that's part of the process. So anyway, if you're thinking about buying a home and you want to know what it's going to take to make the purchase, that's the kind of information and talk that I like to have with buyers. You know, some people may do it differently, but that's how I normally go about it. And it is important to know that stuff as far in advance as possible. And the reason for that is that if they're thinking about buying a home, you want to know as soon as you can what kind of issues there may be in their past or in their present history that need attention before they can make a purchase. There's nothing worse than getting them all excited. They're out there looking at homes, they find a perfect one they want, and then to find out there's a tax lien for $4,000 or $5,000 that they just can't afford to pay off at this point in time. But anyway, that's the way we go. If there's anything I can do to help you in the future, if you're thinking about buying a home and you want to get prepared, I'll help you with that. Or if you want to talk directly to a lender and get some straight scoop from them, I'll refer you to a couple lenders. I usually like to send you to the one that might have the best program for you, so I like to know a little more about your situation at first. But that's something that we can do too. It's always very important to know what kind of financing you're qualified for and what the interest rate is, because that's in large part how we determine what kind of monthly payment you can be approved for. And from the monthly payment, we'll know what kind of price range you can be approved for. Anyway, I hope that gives you a little bit of useful information. And if you're thinking about getting pre-approved or at least pre-qualified, that's the kind of information that we need. If there's anything at all I can do for you, just let me know. I'm always here to help. My number one goal is to help you become a homeowner if that's what you'd like to do. If you're happy being a renter, there's no problem with that. But if you really want to buy a home and become a homeowner, I'm the one to help you, because I'll fight for you tooth and nail until we get you inside your very own home. Thanks again, and as I said, if you have any questions, you can always reach me at 405-210-5319. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks again, and you have a great day out there. Bye-bye. Oh, and just as a point, that number one question that we get, is this house still available? Because they're always wanting to know if that house is still available. Thanks again, and have a great day out there. Bye-bye.